Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. Next stop on the road trip across the country is the go-to parts girl, also known as Kaylee Felio, the sales and marketing manager at PartsEdge. Kaylee, welcome to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. Welcome back, and welcome to your panel as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm really excited to talk about everything we're going to talk about. These are like my core people that I always like to bring on the panel. So thank you guys for joining.
And very grateful to this panel for all you do for fixed operations, Mike Weldon, Shon Kingrey, and Don Andres, and of course, the wonderful Sarah Vantine here as well. So, Kaylee, I'm going to step off and turn the panel over to you, and I'll see you on the other side.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, so much to cover. The last year that we had, 2024, now that we're in 2025, I think the first thing I wanted to cover is supply chain disruptions and how you guys navigated those. I think the main things were strikes happening and continue to happen. So, yeah, let's start with that. What are some strategies, some things? How are you guys overcoming some of the restrictions that they're putting in place? I think, Shon, you had some good topics to share or things to share.
Yeah, I can tell you what hasn't stopped, and it's not because of the strikes anymore. We can't blame COVID anymore. We can't blame it because there's a ship stuck out at sea. And again, 8 stores all being domestic. The problem is not better today than it was a year ago. I can promise you. And I can tell you what, from the domestic side of the OEMs, for whatever reason, and I don't know what the business model is, they're restricting ordering where you're only allowed to order one a week. So it doesn't look like you have an order chain problem. We were at a national Chrysler group meeting, to be honest with you, last year, and they're sitting on stage, and they literally ended the meeting. And I'm not here to bash Chrysler or Stellantis; they have their own problems, but they stopped the meeting because it got so out of control. Well, we don't have an ordering problem. Well, you don't have an ordering problem. You're only letting us order one a week, and each dealer has 200 to 300 backlogs of exhaust manifolds we can't order. Guys, if there's 2,000 dealerships in the United States and everybody has 300, that math adds up quick. What do you tell a client? We were doing a previous panel with Sarah, and Sarah, thank you for dressing up, by the way, Sarah. But we were doing a panel earlier, and we were talking about, again, I'm not here, a Grand Wagoneer. It's a $120,000 unit. All right, transfer case goes bad. The drive shaft physically welded itself to the transfer case. We call Chrysler, there's none available, there's none in the pipeline, and there's no manufacturer date set. What do you tell a client? And I think the new topic is, and this goes back to our Northwoods visit, and a lot of things spawn from Northwoods, and I'm getting way down a rabbit trail here, and I apologize, but everybody that was on stage, and I know Don was there, I know Sarah was there with her daughter, actually. It wasn't about retention, it wasn't about money, it wasn't about ROI, it was CSI. Everybody who was anybody was talking about CSI in Northwood. And it changed my thinking, by the way, for 2025. My entire business model changed because of that pop-up event. And when you tell a client who has a $120,000 vehicle, that they have a transfer case, and you don't have an answer, by the way. You physically can't give them an answer of when you're going to give them a vehicle. And we can go down the trail where they're only reimbursing $40 or $45 a day, and you're not going to rent a Grand Wagoneer from Enterprise for $45 a day. So who's paying the difference at that point? I mean, the parts situation, Kaylee, in my opinion, especially the 3 domestic franchises, is no better today than it was a year ago or 2 years ago. And we have 4 body shops, and body parts are by far worse than that. Waiting for a fender for how long now? Where they're making you go aftermarket, and we all know the fitment on those just doesn't work.
Yeah. So that's a lot. And it's not new news. I mean, that's something it's been going on, and it's not getting better. How are you guys navigating those things? It's just the way you're presenting it, it's like there's no solution. There's nothing that we can do.
Well, again, I can tell you, because I don't want to get edited by Ted, we're making a lot of OEMs very angry because we're just sitting on the phones until we get answers. I mean, now you're telling them they got to shut an assembly line down because every one of those parts are already marked for somebody or for a vehicle that's in production. You have to go find me a transfer case that, by the way, is supposed to be built for somebody, because that is the only option. When it comes to body parts, you're going LKQ. I mean, I don't want to plug them or not plug them, but you have no choice. And now we're putting steering racks. That just goes down a whole nother rabbit trail. Is we're putting steering racks in vehicles and GM vehicles that are aftermarket. And listen, you're talking to a guy who drives a Corvette. I don't want an aftermarket steering rack in my Corvette, but you can't get one from the factory. What other choices do you have? And there are no answers.
There are no answers. Yeah. Mike and Don, do you guys have any perspective on this?
Well, the biggest issue is that we've changed our manufacturing protocol, and a lot of these support vendors can't operate their businesses efficiently and effectively to support ready on time deliveries, which then imposes a problem in the field, which meaning the retail segment of the business. I can date this back. We had problems back, it was domestic brands. Shon's talking domestics, but domestic was a Ford, and Ford had the same problem. My workaround at the time, I had a good relationship with body and assembly engineers, so they were able to still them off the line. Well, they kind of killed that now, so so you can't even do that. But we've run into it with the imports as well. BMW's had some trials and tribulations. Subaru's had some problems, and they just can't manufacture the parts to replace the defective ones that we run across. The other problem that they put us in a rock and a hard spot. They preach and they work on us on CSI and retention. And we said, well, let us put an aftermarket part in this thing until your part becomes available to get this consumer back on the road. Instead, they'll rather let the vehicle sit or it gets bought back. And I just don't think that's a good business model. And I don't think it's going to bode well for us as we go into the future, because it's only going to get tougher as we get more EVs and BEV units. Our lots are only so big. So I think we need to establish some sort of relationship and get an understanding on how to operate our business and become better business partners with the manufacturers.
I think this format, Kaylee, I think it's important as people are listening to this. If there's some people on this on Route 66 program right now that has some influence, in other words, is on some advisory committees, right? I mean, there are committees still, dealer committees out there still on the parts side, that they have to hear on these committees this single sourcing, just-in-time inventory has got a major flaw, and it's always this. It's when something goes wrong, they don't have, first of all, they're going to clear all that off their current inventory, right? If they've established that this part is no good. So not only are you, trying to work through an inventory that doesn't exist, they've cleared the shelves, but now you're waiting for engineering to re-engineer it, go through its protocols, go through stamping, and eventually get it produced. And that's all because we went to single sourcing. So this idea of getting the manufacturer to hear from the dealer body, this is a bad strategy. This idea of single sourcing and just-in-time inventory, there is nothing good about it. There's a lot of bad from it. From a dealer standpoint, it's always communication with the customer and letting them up front. One of the problems I think the dealers sometimes do is that they want to defend the manufacturer because they're the partner. But the reality is, in that moment, they need to sometimes tell the truth. Here's where we're at right now. Here's what we can do for you. Here's some options that we can try to figure out for you. But again, those are conversations that you want to have with a customer. But at the same time, Shon is right. When nobody in the country is going to sell you that part because they desperately are holding on to it or can't get it either. So all your networking in the world that you do isn't going to get you that part from another dealer when it's that much of a shortage. But I think getting the word out in our dealer base that says the manufacturer has to hear from these parts managers that says this model doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
I have so many thoughts. There's I wanted to ask, well, okay, so one question to think about, and you guys don't have to answer this now, but in a perfect world, what is the solution? I mean, I know we don't want to, OEM is what we want to sell, but is the aftermarket the solution for now? And what can we do, I guess, to track this and get ahead so that the parts are being made so it's not like, oh crap, we need all these parts all of a sudden. Like, where is the disconnect, and what can happen in the perfect world so that just like a magic wand? I don't know.
Well, I think transparency is one answer for that. I mean, back to the ordering backlog, and to Don's point, Don's exactly right. The one sourcing is what's causing this. And if they don't have a backlog and they're not allowing you to order them, then it's not showing that there's a backlog, which is, again, it's not true. Well, it's causing it's not true. I mean, you do have a problem. And by the way, there's a thing called the internet. I know it's new and nobody knows what it is. It's not like you have to look real hard to find out that there's a problem. Go on, I use Dodge Rams. Go on Dodge Ram and type in manifold. Well, you can read all night long because nobody can get the part. And they're so far down the list that there's no answer. So to answer your question, a manifold, there is an aftermarket option. They're just not letting you use it yet. And to where Don was saying, guys, you're going to have to start looking at aftermarket parts because there's no other choice.
Yeah.
Ironically, the manufacturers have got pretty intelligent by forcing us on these RIM programs. And they were designed to make sure that we had parts in inventory that were in high demand, but they can't even support their own program.
That's another topic.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I just think that we've got to come up with a solution. And I think Don, the point that he made, if there's an advisory board, I've sat on several, and I will tell you, it's kind of tenacious because it's a very defensive conversation that you have with the manufacturer because they don't want to admit that they have a sourcing problem. And then they say, well, we need to do a better job of ordering parts. So we buy all their programs and we still have this issue. So I think that I think if we all band together and have a open conversation and try to get everything out on the table and then say, okay, where do we go from here? And maybe they need to bring in some vendor partners. Yeah. These support companies. What's creating your issue? You probably find some stuff you're probably not going to be very happy about because, everybody's driving down margins and most of these guys can't afford to run their business that way.
Yeah, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 relationships, some of us go back a long way. And those were there for a reason that if you had a bad failure, you had a power steering rack that went out and you had a quota you needed to meet as a tier 2 or tier 1 provider, you bought from your competition. You bought the parts from your competition just to complete that fill order because you didn't want to lose that relationship. So believe it or not, the customer always won in that situation because the parts were found. Right now, people leave the manufacturer and they move to another brand when they run into these kind of problems. All you got to do is look at Jaguar, look at Land Rover and things of that nature, and how many one and dones are there. They love the product, it's beautiful, and they waited 4 months, 6 months for a repair, and so they just moved on. They went to a Lincoln, they went to a Lexus, they went to another brand. That's the biggest fear. We've done everything right in customer relationships, and then they can't come up with the part and they just move on to another manufacturer.
Yeah, that's the biggest fear. And I think to Mike's point, I had a thought about it just seems like because of the restrictions and things, the data is not accurate. So it's causing to not produce it's like a ripple effect, it seems like. But Sarah, I wanted to loop you in and see if you had any additional questions or if there was something you wanted to bring up as far as the next topic that we're going to talk about.
Yes. So, Shon and Don and Mike have already brought up a lot of really interesting points about what they're seeing, across the industry as it pertains to some of these supply chain challenges. But one of the other pieces that kind of ties into this that we haven't talked about yet is what the consumer is really doing, when it comes to do it yourself type of repair. So in Shon's example, when he's talking about this Corvette, Shon, are you then going and looking, if the manufacturer is not participating and helping to restore the part, you want to drive the vehicle. So are you seeing customers that are going online and purchasing parts from digital, retail, in places where either Amazon or eBay or another provider, and then instead of going to the dealership, now they're doing an aftermarket fix just so they can keep driving the car?
It's exactly what's happening, especially to Don's point. They're creating the one and dones. I mean, that's a great line too, by the way, Don. That's what it is. So if I have a vehicle, again, let's take the Grand Wagoneer that I chose to buy a Grand Wagoneer rather than an Escalade, and I can't get a transfer case. You can't give me a rental, or if I do, I got to pay the difference. Am I buying another Grand Wagoneer? No. I'm going to get it fixed, do what I got to do. To your point, Sarah, of a Corvette, you're going to go aftermarket, probably high performance, which, by the way, now you're going to, because then since you're there already, you're going to find other things that they sell. I couldn't get one of those widgets at the dealer. And to Don's point, you're creating the aftermarket. It's so funny how history repeats itself. Many, many years ago, Chrysler did a thing called the Get It Back Tour, because we wouldn't do oil changes, we wouldn't do tires, and because 20 years ago, we didn't need to do those businesses. So we didn't do those businesses. Well, guess what? We had to get that business back. We're doing it again. I mean, that's all we're doing is we're repeating ourselves 20 years later in just a higher capacity of it. But I think it's different when you got like a performance part, or you have your family vehicle, again, that you have all your money tied into, that there is no fix for it. You're not going to go to Pep Boys and buy a transfer case for a Grand Wagoneer. I mean, because they don't exist. You're just out of luck. And ultimately, it's the dealer's fault. We all know that, because the dealer's the face of the brand, and they're the ones taking the beating.
So on the subject of parts purchasing, and Mike, Don, and Shon weigh in on this as well, but how can dealers, monitor what they're seeing with these customer trends, or anticipate, some of these challenges that might come up, and pivot the customer to maybe a pre-owned car in their inventory, or something else that they could still service? How would y'all suggest they adjust those strategies?
Go ahead, Mike. If you want to chime in, I can.
Well, that's a very tough question to answer. I mean, pre-owned are just as they're in the same boat as a OEM new if you can't get the parts. The only benefit with a pre-owned, if it's out of factory warranty, you can go aftermarket parts, and you can give that consumer the option. I don't know that we're there yet, but I would tell you that if I was a consumer and I had to elect to get a pre-owned vehicle versus a new vehicle that I intended on buying because they can't support the brand, I'm going to look hard at another brand. It's just not good for the business. We're going to do things, the dealers are going to do things to survive. And we got to get better at a lot of things, but if it's impacting our relationships with the customers and our retention and CSI and ESI, because it also impacts your internal employee, then we're going to have to get creative and come up with a solution on our own if we can't get the support from the manufacturers.
Well, and isn't this, I just had a thought, isn't this kind of like brand elimination? Like, isn't there, I don't know if we can talk about it, but isn't there something going on with Nissan and that whole situation? Like, I don't know.
I think there's a partnership, and Nissan's a great example of part availability issues the last few years, where not only was there delays, they just didn't have quality parts at times. And the end result was that there were a lot of failures, and they were running out of inventory on their service part process. So So there's a lot that goes into a manufacturer being successful. And again, it gets back to a customer's loss of confidence. I agree, Mike, that, sometimes buying a vehicle that's a year or two old, the biggest benefit is that there's a number of parts available in the marketplace by then, including, collision yards where there was a front hit, but the perfectly good parts in the backside of the vehicle that they're going to sell. And those are readily available just because of collisions and things of that nature, even though they're just a year old. So yeah, there is something to be said for a vehicle that's over a year old. But, one of the points that you said, Sarah, was there's a lot of people now doing it themselves. We see that in this economic times. And so I think, not to switch gears, but I think a dealer has to be very conscious of that and have some kind of online presence, because ideally the integrity of an OEM part is still the best. We know that because Shon, we've all tried aftermarket at times in our non-manufacturer used car inventory, only to be disappointed that alternator didn't hold up and things of that nature. So, or right out of the box, something didn't work.
But that route, they don't support it too, right? They don't warranty those parts.
Correct. Yeah. But, when you're dealing with the non-manufacturer used car inventory that just has to get there, sometimes we're not always buying them from our local other dealer. We may go aftermarket and things of that nature, and we run into issues sometimes. But I think for us, for that shopper that's online that you mentioned, Sarah, that individuals that do it yourselfer, we want to be in that market. We want to have inventory and priced in such a way that online presence is a positive for us. It sends the right message for when they want to start to look at buying a new car or a used car, and they like our relationship. They like the people that they interact with when they're buying online and maybe coming to the store to pick it up. And things of that nature. And invariably, when you're dealing with parts, they may order it online, and then almost invariably they're going to pick up the phone, call the dealer and say, I want to talk a little bit more about this part. Or maybe they're going to talk to them before they buy it online. So, it's a unique world, the do-it-yourselfers, but we should be in that arena.
I have a thought that can be kind of tricky too. I think if you think about, a counter person and taking those phone calls, I think what I've seen through like forums and things is there's like frustration for the people that are calling in to get the information, but then they don't actually buy. I mean, that's something like, how do you guys navigate that or keep your staff motivated to support those types of calls? Because there are people that do call dealerships just to figure out the part they need, and then they don't get it from the dealership.
Yeah, I will say quickly, and then Shon, you can chime in. The savvy parts guys sometimes put a little bit of fear. Whoa, you're doing that job? Ooh, yeah, you might want to think about having the store take a look at that diagnosis or things of that nature. It's funny how they can sometimes sell the service department with a do-it-yourselfer that's calling in and discussing some problem they have. But at the end of the day, we're in the relationship business. We're in the relationship business. We have to be willing to have conversations with people and build their trust so they talk positively about your store and what you're trying to do to help them get through a difficult time.
I'm going to go down the legal attitude of it. When it comes to a parts person, it's kind of like diagnosing on a service drive. If that parts guy on the phone recommends a widget to fix it and the widget doesn't fix it, it's amazing that customer comes back and wants you to return it. Well, you didn't diagnose it, but you're the one that told me it was broken.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to every parts person does it one time. They don't do it twice.
Yeah.
They encourage the service department, don't they?
Very quickly.
And the other thing that you're working with is incentives that the manufacturer puts on staying with OE. And you've got young parts managers that are not as venturesome, that don't reach out beyond the envelope. We need to develop some protocol to where, the end result is we got to take care of that consumer. I mean, he's going to go to your independent parts houses and everything else, and if they can provide a like part to satisfy his immediate need, they're going to do so. And we need to be the one-stop shop. I mean, that's what we've been fighting for a number of years. And parts, service, or fixed operations depends on each other, and we can't support our shop, then they're going to go to the independents, who in turn is going to go and get a aftermarket component. So, we need to look at these things, because it's a two-edged sword.
Absolutely. There's so much more I think we could cover on this topic, but I feel like we hit the core of it and have some ideas, and hopefully by anyone listening, getting that advisory, getting this out there so that we can start getting some solutions.
This is a
It's
great
not getting
panel.
better, according, it's just almost
And the
getting worse.
dealer, I think the dealer themselves at their dealer meetings can also drive home that point as well too. Dealers have tremendous influence themselves.
True. Very well said. Kaylee, once again, fantastic retail panel with what's happening in our industry. So I want to thank all of you for being with us today. Mike Weldon, amazing information. Thank you. Great insights as well. Shon Kingrey, is it still cold up there in Madison, Wisconsin?
It's a blissful warm at 9 degrees, sir. We're great up here.
Oh, okay. Very nice. All right.
No snow. No snow.
All right. But Don, you have snow in Ohio, I think.
Oh yeah. And cold. We got it all.
And Sarah Vantine, thank you so much. Kaylee, if our audience wants to learn more about PartsEdge and reach out, how do they do it? What's the best way?
You can find me on LinkedIn, just Kaylee Felio, or our website, PartsEdge.com, to learn more. And we do have a lot of resources on there for anyone that wants to know more about parts and inventory management and all that good stuff. So thank you.
And Kelly, thank you for all you do for our industry. You've really brought parts into the forefront here in 2025. So
thank you. Yeah, it's crazy to look back where we started and where we are now.
Right.
So,
I can't imagine the future. So it's going to be so great. So everybody, the PartsEdge panel with us here today at the Fixed Ops Roundtable.